JC Shurburtt of Inside the Gamecocks. JC, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
Hey, doing well, man. I just noticed that I guess Dan Mullen named South Carolina one of his teams of the week, and Shane Beamer just retweeted it. And oh wow, that's
Oh
gonna
gosh.
that's gonna
Let
cause
the
the
let the
Twitterverse to.
yes. Per sources season, JC. It is that
Oh
time of
man,
year, my friend.
something
The
else,
message
right?
boards are buzzing. I know your neck of the woods, it is buzzing, but that's the beautiful thing, man. We love this time of year for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, man. Like I said, I appreciate you coming on, and what a great day it is to chat with you. Obviously, after the weekend, we'll go ahead and dive into it. What a game! I mean, where do you even start, man? South Carolina snaps the streak, and we were all kind of wondering right after that game against Tennessee, not necessarily, was it a fluke, but could the Gamecocks follow that up yet again and taking on another top 10 opponent, taking on an opponent that had your number, you hadn't beaten since 2013? I'll ask you first, JC, since you asked me as well. Just talk about your emotions this week, man, because it was a jubilant Saturday for Gamecock Nation. I actually loved the fact the game was at noon because it gave us all day to celebrate. And then we had
Mm.
Victory Sunday, and it's just been I think this fan base and everybody involved with Gamecocks football has been on cloud nine all week long.
Yeah, I think with the Tennessee game the week before, I was just like, "Holy cow!" And
Mhm.
I've been kind of saying all year, about mid-season after they spanked LSU. I'm sitting in a sports bar in Lexington, Kentucky, with my buddies and some good Gamecock friends, and we're watching ball before we go to the stadium, right? And I'm just sitting there, because I was like, LSU will score a bunch on them or whatever. Now it's good. LSU couldn't move the ball in Tennessee, so I quit kind of doubting their defense and praised them during the week, and I was like, wow, Carolina's just lighting these guys on fire. So I was just kind of stunned, and I was like, well, there hasn't really been a situation in a long time. I think the best back-to-back stretch of games since Spurrier left was probably 2017 when they beat NC State and then beat Missouri on the road. And then they came back home and played Kentucky, obviously, and laid an egg. And the Beamer era has kind of been like up and down, up and down, up and down, week to week. And you did have Kentucky A&M back to back. There was an open date between that. So turning it right around and going to Clemson, I'm like, it's gonna be a tall task. Clemson's much better on defense than Tennessee, and I think they are. Obviously, their defense scored 9 points in the game. They only had 30. But this one was nervous because growing up in South Carolina, you grow up with that game. It's the biggest game of the year. You're on one side or the other. It's always intense. Even in 19, man, I'll tell the story real quick. 19, they had no chance. And what was so sad about 19 too was Carolina had an open date before the Clemson game.
Mm-hmm.
She had to wait. Even in 19, I just kind of moved up into the Chicago area part time to hang out with my fiance, right? And so I was going to be Mr. Good Boyfriend and go to a Friendsgiving dim sum in Chinatown in downtown Chicago. And the dim sum started at like 10:10 local, right? So I got 50 minutes before the game starts, and this dim sum lasts forever, right? And so I'm sitting there, and even in that moment, because I knew I was going to miss part of the game, it's tense, it's emotional. By the time I got to a place to watch, it was 24-3, so it was over. But even in those moments with this rivalry, you feel that on both sides if you grow up with it. And so I was just kind of at the edge of my seat. I felt good after Mitch Jeter hit the field goal. I thought Carolina may have to go score again, but I thought the offense was getting into a rhythm to a certain extent in terms of being able to hit big plays. And so I was less worried. And then things kept happening where the offense would stall, and then Kai Kroger gets off his worst punt of the day. Right, he's been booming them all day. I think Clemson got Colquitted, because South Carolina used to play Tennessee, and they had like 5 different punters that were brothers named Colquitt, and they were just boom, field position and all that during the Holtz era. Gets off his worst punt, and then here comes Antonio Williams, but here comes Nate Atkins, a hero, and knocks the ball free. Carolina gets it, and then 3 plays later, another heroic play by Juice Wells to get the first down. They run out the clock. They win the game.
Mm.
It happened. The victory kind of came suddenly, Chris, because Clemson doesn't fumble there. They're even a fluke pass, a busted coverage, whatever, away from a repeat of 2000 where they run out the clock, kick the field goal. They got a great field goal kicker in Potter. So you didn't want that to happen, So even at that moment, before they got the first down, I'm sitting there doing math, going, can they run it out? What, that kind of thing. It didn't hit me. So it was like, I kind of went from, oh crap, they're going to, hopefully they don't lose. And you got a tense moment to, wow, they won, and it was kind of hit me suddenly. But boy, yeah, I was thrilled all day. From a business standpoint, obviously, controversy is good for traffic and subs and stuff like that sometimes, but nothing beats high-end success. And then on top of that, a coaching sir. So that's been great. Again, having grown up with it, my Gamecock friends told me for a while that this may end up like Virginia and Virginia Tech, where Tech ran off 14 in a row, because Clemson's here and Carolina can't get its act together. Well, I think Shane Beamer showed that things can change quickly. I think also South Carolina had the better quarterback in the game. That makes a big difference. I think South Carolina had better receivers. I think South Carolina had the best secondary in that football game. And I think South Carolina's defense made the adjustments necessary to stop the run. And then the field position game, what that does is sometimes, and especially if you're Clemson, they're not the high flying act they used to be on offense. They play a little conservative, so they're easier to diagnose because they don't want to throw it and turn it over or whatever and risk anything when you're that far backed up. So it's basically runs. And so I think that all that worked together and, they snapped the streak. Dabo said after the game, there's a reason nobody's ever won 8. And nobody's ever won 8. And it's going to be a while before somebody has a chance to win 8 again. So that was all those things were great. And just you're not only beating 2 top 10 teams in a row, Chris, but those 2 teams. I mean, gosh, yeah. Carolina wants to beat them every single year. So doing that was special. I think now you look at Shane Beamer, 15 wins over 2 years. 5 of those have come as double-digit underdogs, not just 11 points or so, but 22, 20, 12 and a half against North Carolina and Auburn. Clemson was 14 and a half. That's starting to become a trend during his tenure where, shoot, why even look at the point spread? They have a chance. Yeah. And that sense of belief that is because of him. It's because of who he is and his leadership style. That sense of belief permeates. You're still dealing with college kids. And if they believe and you believe and you can go out there and execute and play and with confidence, any given Saturday, you can win. I don't think it was a fluke win. I think Carolina was a better football team. Carolina made a lot of mistakes in that game. Clemson did too, but Clemson had kind of had fumbleitis for 2 weeks anyway. But you throw a pick six, you get a safety. Their last touchdown that they threw was on a busted coverage. And there was too many men. There's 5 guys in the backfield, by the way, the refs missed on Clemson. But, Carolina made, the mistakes that could have cost them. But I don't think there was any question, even in a 1-point game, who the better football team was on Saturday.
Yeah, JC, we talked about it this morning that, I think Clemson was very fortunate it was only a 1-point result, right? I think South Carolina could have easily won that game by double digits. But you brought up something earlier that I don't know that I've talked about or that anybody really has talked about a ton this week, but the significance of South Carolina putting back-to-back good performances together. Because that was something I feel like going in the game that, like, everybody got talked to. It was like, it was funny. It was because you had beaten Tennessee. It's almost like Gamecock fans, and I don't blame them, right? Because, we've seen this over the history of this program. It just seem like that every time something good happens, for whatever reason, it has to be followed up with something not good happening. And so for this team to sort of go against the grain and put their foot down and say that's not going to happen this time, and to be able to put back-to-back good performances together. And I talked about the stat last week that Carolina, following and against the spread win, which they obviously had against Tennessee. They were 1-9-1 against the spread. So, there were some numbers that backed up that Carolina, just for whatever reason, did not follow up good performances with another good performance. And I think it was just great to see, JC. And, in the short term, you broke the trend. We'll see what happens through the long term, but maybe that's something that can that trend can sort of either go away or get reversed moving forward, that people don't necessarily around here expect expect bad things to follow up good things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the other shoe is going to drop. Yeah, I mean that's
Yeah.
it's one of those things. It's so hard in the Southeastern Conference, right? Because even the Spurrier years, you'd have that one game where you go, man, that was tough,
Yeah.
or something like that. You don't normally win them all. It's hard to win in this sport,
Yeah.
but what you want is to have a chance to win every time out, and to play every game with confidence, and to make some statements. I mean, I think so much with the media these days and all that about this game is about, and it's really historically always been this way. College football is one of the few sports that perception matters a lot. Not more than reality, but perception does matter. Think about how they used to determine the national champion. They vote. That's a perception play. That's a campaign, right?
I'd almost, JC, love to see that today, just for the pure chaos.
Oh man, yeah, the voters,
pure chaos.
It used to be guys like us, media guys. We'd vote. We were determining the national champs. And how do you get players? You recruit. That's a campaign. You got to go convince somebody to vote for you. You got to go convince somebody to come to your school. So perception matters so much. And when you do something like South Carolina did, and all of a sudden, you're the talk of college football, and you won those two games kind of with the style that's popular these days. I thought Clemson got a lot of traction out of losing the national title game to Bama. It was a 5-point game, and just the spin that Dabo put on it was, should have won, could have won. Well, you were down 12, man, and threw a late touchdown to cut it 5, but still 45-40, exciting back and forth game. Everybody in the country's talking about it. That helps your program. When you do it these days, when you do, and I love defensive games too, don't get me wrong, but when you do it in the manner the game got 63-38, 31-30, thrilling game right down to the wire. Tennessee was the talk of college football. You thumped them. I haven't heard anybody talk about Tennessee last couple of weeks. Clemson's been, one of the blue bloods, for 7-8 years now. Boom, you knocked them out. And I think what that does is it facilitates a better argument in recruiting, and you get more benefit of the doubt when it comes to things like recruiting rankings or polls or things, all those things that don't really matter, that don't go into winning and losing on game day, but that can help to facilitate, I hate to keep using that word, better talent, more access to talent, more access to players, more excitement for assistant coaches to take jobs there, better fan support. And all those things in an ancillary way go into winning, in this sport. So it wasn't necessarily just the wins or the opponents, because Gamecock fans are thrilled about it. It was the style too. I mean, where did that come from? I mean, Carolina looked like Oklahoma a couple of years ago beating these guys. LSU really beat in 2019 beating these guys. So I think that was just I said today to Phil on the show, I was like, I still think kind of the earth, the world ended, the Friday night before the Tennessee game, and we're kind of living in a suspended alternate reality. I said I have to pinch myself a little bit, but that's the best thing possible. The last 2 weeks that could happen for this program, and God loves Steve Spurrier, and Beamer's got a long way to go to win 86, but he never did anything like this. I don't think he won 5 games as double-digit underdogs at South Carolina his 10.5 years. And I would never say, I'm not predicting Beamer will be better than Spurrier, but there are some things he's done that are for the first time and are unique that will help him continue to build.
Yeah, JC, it's always a good sign when your coach is achieving and your program is achieving first, right? And so first time ever beating top 10 teams back to back in school history. That's significant, right? That's not some footnote. That's a big deal. On the field, JC, let's get back to it. We gotta, we got to start with Spencer Rattler on the offensive side. I mean, I know Juice Wells is a guy you had been clamoring to get the ball more and more and more, and now I think people see why. Nate Atkins just played out of his mind on Saturday, had his best game, obviously, of the year. Josh Van, before that injury, was making plays. Jalen Brooks, I
Yeah.
thought, was making plays. Give the offensive line credit for going toe-to-toe with that fantastic Clemson defensive front. But I think you got to give a lot of credit to Seven, man, for what he did, bouncing back, especially after the early pick six and then the red zone pick. And I mean, you're thinking to yourself, man, this thing could just really get out of control. But he's able to make that gutsy throw on fourth down, fourth and goal, and then put his head down and get the touchdown. I think it was on from there. Just talk about what you saw from Spencer Rattler. I know we talked about it again a little bit this morning, but just how impressive was his game against Clemson, especially after the rocky start?
Man, resiliency came to mind, and I think winning quarterbacks, winning football players, winners in life, really, Chris. They're not necessarily people that go out and when everything goes great, they're great. I think it's called, like, you call that a front runner, right? uh, I think real winners are the ones that when things are down and things are not going well, they battle back and they refuse to give in to the current mediocrity, that's part of whatever situation that they're in. Uh, and that's what we saw out of Spencer Rattler. And frankly, I think we've seen, not based on performance, but we've seen signs of that this year. I don't think Spencer's ever given up. Even in the Florida game, shoot, you had that fumble or whatever on the let's run into the brick wall play call. Spencer goes and tackles a 413 pounder. you know, uh, I don't know where the narrative about. I guess every and look, man. I'm glad people don't judge me on what I did in high school, right? I did. I'd go back in time and slap the crap out of myself, honestly, thinking about some of the things I said, did, how I treated people. But that stigma from that stupid reality show has followed Spencer around, and I think a lot of people when he got benched at Oklahoma were like, ha ha ha, that's just not who he is, man. And it was good to see that resiliency and that attitude, the good attitude he's had through thick and thin all season, pay off with execution, performance, and a delivered desired outcome, because it doesn't always happen that way. But I think he rallied. He shook off the pick six. I mean, the pick six and the pick in the end zone alone would have ruined the day for most quarterbacks. Not him. He just kept firing them down the field and then threw some beautiful passes and got back in a rhythm and was a difference maker. So, and the toughness on the touchdown run. I mean, you just can't really say enough about his refusal to go down uh, and go out after that great game against Tennessee, and go out in the Clemson game like, oh, it was a one game fluke or whatever. So very happy for him. I don't know if he's coming back next year or not, but I'll say this: if he does, and Wells comes back, and Bell and Lloyd and all these guys that could on offense, and they get a competent OC, which I believe they will, it could be a fun. It could be an even more. The fun will continue next year. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, JC, and on that note too about the game, just a complete team win as well. Obviously you give credit to Rattler what the offense did, but man, the way the defense bowed their neck in the second half and especially the fourth quarter. You talk about Beamer ball, and I mean Kai Kroger. You could have named him MVP of the game. I mean the way he booted the ball and then those big turnovers on special teams, and just I'll give you the opportunity to talk about what Clayton White and Pete Limbo's units did, because I know we spent a lot of time talking offense. That's the most fun, I would say, part of the game to discuss. But it was so cool to see, like, all three phases had a major helping hand in winning that football game, especially, like I said, in that second half where the defense dropped their nuts and Beamer ball showed itself. And, you put all that together and led to victory.
Yeah, I mean, look, Clayton White and his defense. Now look, I'll be honest. Sometimes it would be better if he would adjust in the second quarter rather than wait until halftime. But he always does. He's very good at going in, figuring out what's wrong. They come back the second half. They usually, 9 times out of 10, they're not getting gutted anymore. And they were giving up some rushing yards. And I think, the 3 and out and then the punt return by Amari and Brady. You talk about playing complementary football and the other two phases. The first drive of the second half. Clemson goes down and goes up 30-14, and Shipley runs 60 yards on 8 carries on that drive. At that point, you're kind of getting drug all over the field. But they bowed up. They stopped him. They forced DJ to throw the ball. He was not good. 8 for 29. And the secondary, dropped its nuts, and they started just dominating the Clemson receivers, and the front seven, I think, responded well. Clemson's got a pretty good offensive line, right? And so I thought those guys responded well on the interior. Sherrod Green and Brad Johnson kind of had rebound performances in the second half after not so well in the first, and the Nick Emenware hit on DJ. I think DJ, after he got lit up by Emenware, was 1 for 8, something like that, and looked a little tentative to run after that because DJ was getting some rushing yards. So, boy, freshman Nick Emenware right there in Irmo, playing high school, playing for the Irmo Yellow Jackets last year, lighting up the 5-star phenom or whatever they call him, DJ. And I think that had a big effect on their quarterback because he didn't really want any running the ball, and he was off throwing it. Nobody was really open, but he was off throwing it nonetheless. So, hats off. Sometimes little things like that, when a big hit like that, can change the complexion of a game. And so I do think, Clayton White and his group deserve, Torian Gray and that secondary, they all deserve a lot of credit for really making Clemson one-dimensional and then stopping in the second half what Clemson does best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you love it too. Emenware, blast from the past, when he said that Clemson was on the clock when he signed, or I guess committed, or whatever video that was, whenever that was, when he put the Tigers on the clock, and sure enough, he delivered. I mean, what a season he had! Unbelievable as we look back on the regular season. From the recruiting side of things, JC, I'm curious, what was the impact? I mean, obviously this win to beat Clemson, finish year 2 of Shane Beamer's tenure, 8-4 in the regular season, and now you await what should be a pretty sexy bowl destination. What was the recruiting impact of this win? Have you noticed anything, felt anything? I mean, I'd have to imagine, we've talked about it for so many years, but there are recruiting battles that happen within the state. I know Clemson doesn't recruit quite as much in state anymore in regards to they're able to go nationally, but this obviously helps South Carolina on the recruiting trail, and for Shane Beamer to continue to sell this football program.
Yeah, I think the guys like Marquis Anderson, who they beat Clemson on this year, who Clemson wanted from Dorman High School of all places. And I'll just say this about Dorman: probably a lot of unhappy faculty members and students at Dorman High School on Monday that wear orange normally. But guys like him, I think he just reinforces things. And then, you have a kid in Cam Pringle, the 2024 offensive tackle, that was at the game as a guest of Clemson. He's from Woodland, down in the Low Country. That's where Ty Hill went to school. That's where Robert Smith, who played on their national championship team as a safety, went to school. Clemson usually got. Yeah, that's not good English there, right? Clemson usually has gotten just about everybody out of there. And here comes Cam Pringle, who's the highest rated of them all. This guy's a franchise left tackle, right tackle. It looks like the guys that go to Alabama and Georgia and play that position. Right. And then you got another one in the state next year, Josiah Thompson at Dillon, which has been a Gamecock-friendly place. South Carolina got off to a big lead for Pringle. Clemson's closing. Georgia's in it. Ohio State's in it. For a kid like that, Clemson wins that game Saturday. It goes to 8 in a row. They go back to the playoff. What the pitch from them is yeah, you can go South Carolina all you want, but they're at that's a different level than we're at. You're not going to get to go to the playoff. You're not going to ever experience victory in this series. Beating them, knocking them out of the playoff, that takes a lot of recruiting arrows. And you'd kind of be surprised that negative recruiting does not happen as much as maybe it used to. Everybody just kind of sells themselves, but in the process of selling yourself, if you're on an 8-game win streak, you're going to the playoff, all that, and your rivals, in the Birmingham Bowl, you can point out that distinction. It's not negative; it's the truth. So I think with a guy like that, it really goes a long way. And even other underclassmen that may have watched it from other states that, in their mind, because last time South Carolina was good, they were what 16, 17, now 7. So in their mind, that they may have liked Shane Beamer and the facilities and the crowd and all that, but they want to go to a program that has a chance to win a championship. And so whenever you can do that and say, well, hey, this is a program that can win on that stage, it's a huge impact now. And I wouldn't be surprised if some seeds weren't planted for some kids that watch that especially like from the state of Georgia, that were at the A&M game. There was 8 of the top 100 for 2024 there, that may have caught the Tennessee game on TV, and that now they go see that against a program in Clemson that, to the Georgia kids, that's not an in-state rival thing. Those are the South Carolina programs, and maybe you're trying to compare them. For those kids, they're like, well, wait a minute, this place has a light show. It's cool. Beamer's awesome. Derek Moore's the man. They beat Tennessee. They're on the way up. I wouldn't be surprised if some seeds weren't planted with that next class, to where the Gamecocks are going to be in the game with some guys that, had this last 2 weeks not happened, it would have been a tougher sell to maybe even get them to visit. But now I think this will pay off, in spades with that next class.
Now, JC, we had Savell Newton call in earlier this week, and
I thought that was awesome, by the way.
Yeah. No, it's cool, man. Savell, obviously a really good friend of mine, and he's been calling in a little bit more recently, and I think you and I probably both love the fact that Savell he calls it as it is. He just says whatever's on his mind, and I respect the hell out of that. But I thought he made an interesting point. I want to get your take on it in regards to, with the jubilation of the last 2 weeks and finishing 8-4 also comes with the, man, just what if, like what this season could have been. Do you also feel that a little bit, that like had they taken the handcuffs off earlier, had there been a competent OC in place the entire time, just kind of what the season could have, because it's crazy, man. You lost to 6-6 Arkansas, 6-6 Florida, 6-6 Mizzou. Like it's and I'm ecstatic with 8-4. I want to make that very clear, right? Because I looked at the Shane Beamer process, his tenure, as like, I'm not, hey, if he doesn't have it winning 10 games by year 3, he's not the guy. I just always had a little bit more patience, I think, than some others. But it is kind of wild when you look back on this season and you're like, man, if they could have got that offense clicking sooner, this could have gone from a good year to like a really, really special season. Your thoughts on kind of where you sit with that? How much of it is there a balance, or do you think that way at all?
Oh, I talked to a good source inside the program, and I ran that scenario by him, and he said, absolutely. He said, just to be honest, only Georgia had better personnel. I was like, wow, that's tough. And so there is a flip side. But think about something you just said, Chris. This is interesting. I don't know that I've ever heard of a head coach making the offensive coordinator take the handcuffs off himself. That's weird. Because usually it's the head coach that puts the handcuffs. I think with some defensive minded coaches, especially, you'll get that. Kirby Smart, man, he may throw the handcuffs on sometimes, right? No, run it, and we got to play defense and punt and vertical field position and all that good stuff, right? I don't think I've ever seen a head coach have to step in and go, take the handcuffs off your own offense, man. It's crazy. It's one of the most South Carolina things ever. But yeah, man, you think about that against Arkansas. Gamecocks weren't really stopping them that day. But I think when you're not scoring and you get into a hole and you're down 21-3 and you cut it to 21-16 and then you finally Zach Pickens makes a big play, stops them on 4th and 1, and you immediately go 3 and out. That's demoralizing to a defense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they'd have been in the game with Georgia or not, but I'm pretty confident it would have been a lot more competitive. Missouri, obviously, they needed that, and then even with Florida, man, you're going 3 and out, 3 and out. You're not stopping the run, okay, but you're not doing anything offensively to sort of give yourself a chance. And so, yeah, I think with this offense, and they've been doing like that, they have good enough players. They very easily could have been 11-1, and we could have probably been talking, Chris, about them going to the playoff. And so you look at that and you're disappointed, but you can't change it, and that problem is gone. And I think that Beamer has an opportunity to really not only fix it, but take that offense to the next level. And very few programs lose often that are opportunistic and good and sound on defense, that have an explosive offense with great playmakers, and that are that good on special teams. Those teams are hard to beat. And so if you just continue this momentum and fix the offense, and they get some fortune with a lot of guys coming back, man, you don't have to go to Arkansas this year. A Mississippi State team that loses about everybody's coming to town. Tennessee loses everybody. You do have to go to Knoxville, but they lose just about everybody. Florida is going through more transition. Missouri, you just need to beat them, right? There's no more excuses. And so, and who knows what'll happen out in Aggie land. But you kind of look ahead and it's like, man, if guys come back and the Gamecocks are preseason ranked, that North Carolina game, instead of being, noon in sweltering weather on ESPNU, it could be we could see Chris and Herbie again, man, or something like that. It could be a premier kickoff game. So, I think there's just a lot to look forward to. A lot has to fall in place. But I think, you'd say, oh, well, these games give you hope. I think this gives you more than hope. I think this gives you faith, I guess, in the future. And people need to understand too. Yes, there's been some ugly games. Yeah, I think Beamer should have fixed the offense last year. So what? This guy, in spite of all that, again, 5 of his 15 wins are against teams that he was double-digit underdogs to. And if he wins the bowl game, he'll, and people don't want to hear it because Muschamp talked about this a lot, and it was true. But he'll pass Muschamp, Spurrier, and Joe Morrison for the most wins in the first 2 years of a program, first 2 years of a job at South Carolina. And considering the crap on offense the last 2 years, that's nothing short than amazing when you look at it big picture wise.
Yeah, I mean, that's a significant number for sure. JC, obviously on that note, I would have to imagine things played out about as well as they could for Shane Beamer and company. With you win the last 2 games, Sat gets to land on his feet, we get to land on our feet, we get the change we all wanted. It doesn't come, amidst turmoil and disappointment and a disgruntled fan base. Everybody's on a high, and so now here we are. Just talk about I know it's per source this season, as I mentioned, that, Dan Mullen's name started to catch fire late last night.
God.
I mean, it was just, you're hearing, you're hearing the typical names, I guess names that, Brad Crawford, our good buddy, wrote a great article with some of the top candidates with guys like Bryles and Riley and Marion and some others. And maybe they go to a Kitchens or a Justin Stepp, God forbid. What you're hearing and what your overall thoughts are on this OC search, because what makes it so intriguing, this is so much different from the first time Beamer went through this. It's so much sexier of a job coming off the way you finished the season. You should be able to open the checkbook up a bit. Your overall thoughts on the OC search? I mean, do you have any preferences? Are you hearing anything? Just overall thoughts on that.
Dan Mullen's name. Look, I've followed coaching searches, not just in Carolina, but everywhere. I got some guys I call and that are in the know, agents, people that just cover coaching searches, guys that are pseudo agents that are kind of go-betweens. Not everything's always, just because you get a name that could have been floated because that guy's agent wants him to get a raise. That could have been floated because Dan Mullen's sitting around drinking Miller Lite one day and just calls his agent because he's like, "Hey, just flood me for some jobs. South Carolina offensive coordinator's open. So I just want to hear my name out there." Not saying that happened, but that happens. You just never know. So Brad heard his name, and then I'd heard it from a couple of people, and I said, I'm not buying it, but here's a name because that's kind of my job. You got to feed the minions some raw meat sometimes, with a coaching search. And so I said, I don't know. I'll say this, resume wise, if you can hire Dan Mullen, you need to hire Dan Mullen. I mean, who else can you hire that's coached Alex Smith, the number one pick of the draft, Tim Tebow, a Heisman Trophy winner, Dak Prescott is one of the most popular players in the NFL right now. Won 2 national championships as a coordinator and also had an undefeated season at Utah as a coordinator. I think one of the winningest coaches in Mississippi State history. And oh, by the way, with Kyle Trask and a guy named Kyle Pitts, who South Carolina's got a guy that's a lot like that. Won the SEC East and was 6 points away from beating Bama as the head coach at Florida. Dan Mullen as a head coach obviously has his issues, that they were not happy with at Florida. I think he could have stayed at Mississippi State forever, but I mean, he didn't meet the expectation there with, the recruiting and all that. But as an offensive coordinator, I don't know who's better. I mean, who's better? Now that said, I think it's probably about a 5% chance of that even coming to fruition. Shane Beamer didn't help the matter today when he retweeted the Dan Mullen team of the week or whatever, because people are going to run with that. But a guy like that runs a proven system that can move the ball, that no matter what style of quarterback you have, you may have a preference. You can go out there and make it work. You're not always going to have a lot of everything at South Carolina, including depth. So if you got an injury, that kind of thing. So I like him. Kendall Briles is still a name to now that's a name to actually keep an eye on. And, just talking to some people around him, I think there's some mutual interest there. Definitely. I think he could emerge as a candidate for the FAU head coaching job. I'd also watch him to maybe explore going on Hugh Freeze's staff at Auburn. And people say, well, why would he want to do that if he wants autonomy? Because Hugh's an offensive guy. And that's a good point. Some coaches, though, they want to go to a name program because in their minds, it's easier to win there. And that's what it's all about, the path of least resistance. Now, South Carolina done enough. I don't know. But, so that's a situation with him. Graham Harrell from West Virginia, who I think got a terrible rap for them this year. He's also a guy that works for an offensive coordinator that's probably had to pull his hair out up there. I thought he did a great job at Southern Cal. We all know him as the Texas Tech quarterback that threw the pass to Michael Crabtree in the game where they beat Texas. But, he runs a good system. Kevin Johns from Duke is a guy that I could see him taking a look at. Even Justin Lynch from Vanderbilt had a great year, and he was Pete Limbo's OC at Ball State. I don't see Freddie Kitchens getting it just because I think Freddie wants to go back to the league and coach, and it may be sooner rather than later. I don't know, but I think he has his eye on that. But anybody else, I think take your pick with guys. I mean, I'll tell you some guys I don't like. Jake Spavital, I would steer clear. The guy followed Cliff Kingsbury at A&M. They got worse. He went some other places. They didn't get all that. They got worse. Texas State's a job that's tough, but they got worse. Zach Kitley from Texas Tech is a name that came out early on the hot board. He's a Texas Tech alum, but he was the guy that came from Houston Baptist to Western Kentucky with Bailey Zapp, who's with the Patriots now. And transformed their offense in a year and then went back to Texas Tech. If you watch Texas Tech play this year, yes, they're an air raid, but they're more similar to the Lincoln Riley style where they'll run the ball. And Shane's right by saying that. When he says you need an offense that's able to run the ball and throw it, because you don't want to be you never want to be undimensional. Well, I'm sorry, one-dimensional, undimensional. My God, JC, one-dimensional in this game. So I look at that, and those are just some of the guys I like.
Mhm.
But there's a plethora of acceptable candidates. And I'll add this one more detail here. There have been no interviews, uh, anything like that. Many times you don't even, the interview's a formality if you've decided on one guy or whatever. But I do know for a fact, no interviews. They tracked somebody tracked the university plane to DeKalb County yesterday, and they decided that Lake Oconee was an hour from DeKalb. I don't know what road they're taking, and that he was secretly meeting with Mullen. Right, that wasn't him. The focus this week internally has been
Mhm.
on returning players,
Mhm.
player interviews, the current situation. That's not to say Beamer hadn't made calls and had some conversations, because I know he has, but they're not on the verge of hiring a Dan Mullen right now, or on the verge of doing this, unless it's something happened like lightning struck, which would be unprecedented, and they get it done soon. And I think it's fine. I think with the last 2 weeks, Chris, I think had things gone badly the last 2 weeks, there would have been a sense of urgency that had to take place, because you're trying to stop the bleeding in the portal. You're trying to get recruits signed and all that. I think that's one thing. Okay. But I think he bought himself a lot of leeway and time, because and I've said this before, if I'm recruiting, I'm just going to say, if they ask me what kind of offense we're going to run, I'm just going to look at it and point to the last 2 weeks and say, exactly that. Yeah, same thing. And it looks like fun. It's appealing. So I think the whole uh, pressure, time frame pressure, all that really was alleviated by becoming, the top story in college football.
JC, I appreciate you taking the time. Last thing before I get you out of here, just real quick. Just, I thought about asking about like returning players, but I feel like it's just kind of all speculation at this point. So I'll ask you just the importance of this OC hire. Because, I mean, I said it weeks ago before the back-to-back top 10 wins that this hire was going to be massively important to get it right? Because the fan base and the program will live with one swing and miss. Hey, it's all on Sad. All the blame's on him. But if you swing and miss again, the blame starts to shift, right? And obviously, like you mentioned, you bought yourself time and you bought yourself trust with the fan base because of the last 2 weeks and the turnaround. But just in your opinion, how important is it that they hit a home run with this OC hire?
you know, I think Gamecock fans sometimes define, but because of who's been hired here before, where you're like
Mm,
sitting there going, "Oh my God, Steve Spurrier is the coach." I'm in
mm,
disbelief. I think sometimes fans consider that a home run.
mm,
I think the home run is going to come in the production. I don't think you can afford to do any more experiments like BMAC, SAT.
mm,
No more guys that have worked for the guy that have not been that good on their own, like Roper.
mm,
You need a guy. You need a guy that's got a track record of doing it. I don't care if it's from Group of Five or FCS or wherever, and somebody that's innovative. And Shane, uh, he has to know. Like Liam Cohen from the Rams, his name is on some list somewhere. I think that would be a horrible decision. Horrible. No more NFL, man. I mean, and I think you have to. These NFL guys are too complicated. They can't get out of their own heads. Um, Shane has to believe now, but based on the last 2 weeks, that hey, the way to go is keep it simple, stupid, and let your players make plays. And I think that's the direction he's going to go. And people don't need to freak out if he calls it a pro style offense or not. There's all kinds of pro style offenses, but I think that it needs to be a guy that's productive, that knows not only how to call plays and all that good stuff, but knows how to teach his players how to do it, and has a plan for them to master it, to where they can play free, and the mental side of the game takes care of itself. That was the genius of Steve Spurrier, Ellis Johnson, most of the coaches that have had success here over the years. Very, very simple stuff that they did on both sides of the ball, with a lot of masking, a lot of wrinkles here and there that were easy to learn, and then have their guys go out and play it with speed, and that's worked, and that's what I think it'll work in this situation.
mm. JC, always a pleasure, my friend, as we hit 2 o'clock. Thank you so much, JC Shurburtt, Inside the Gamecocks, the Big Spur. Y'all stay tuned. Check out his work. I know that the message boards will be popping. And JC, how dare you ruin flight tracker season for some folks out there?
Ah, nah,
I saw it. Hey, I saw it last night too. And I will say this: I love it. And maybe some would advise me not to say this, but like, the people who track the flights, God bless you. That is a level of that's a level of
Yeah.
wanting to get scoop that I don't know I've reached that point yet. Like,
I
that to
I
me is insane.
the
To a
the,
level,
fo- the folks
to a
that do
degree.
that, the folks that look at like coaches' Twitter accounts and sees anybody from South Carolina all of a sudden following them and all
Right,
that.
right.
Absolutely, man.
Yes, yes.
But those are my people. Those are the people that keep me in business. I love
Yeah,
that. So
you need
thank you.
those people. You need those
Yes,
people for sure.
we
The
all
flight
do.
tracker people, incredible. You love to see it.
All right.
JC Shurburtt, I appreciate you, man. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Chris. Be good, bud.
Yeah, man. We'll talk soon.